Hey guys, welcome back for a new painting video. So today I decided to go for a misty foggy forest. I wanted to share my process step by step with you and I hope you enjoy. So the first step here is adding our sky. For this I'm using a large filbert brush and mixing white and a tiny bit of black. We want to have a gray color to making our sky. And we're only painting the top of the canvas at this point, as the rest will be covering with another color. Alright, when it's done, we just let it dry. The next step is adding our first hill. So for that, I'm mixing some sap green, some white, and a little bit of deep green. I'm also using a small filbert brush this time. We want to make sure that this part has more white to it because it's going to be very far away on the background. Here, I realized that I needed to add a bit more white to my paint. Okay, so now I'm mixing some sap green with black this time to get a darker color. I'm making the other hill, which is going to be closer to us. And here I also realized that I forget to add some texture into my first hill. So I'm quickly getting a fan brush, as you can see, and use the brighter color from the background. So the color we used at the beginning, which is sap green, white, and deep green. So I'm adding a little bit of pressure on top of that hill to make the illusion of trees. You don't want to be too detailed because it's very far away again, so we don't want to be too precise. It's just going to be a little bit like this. And now I'm doing the same thing with the other darker color. And now I'm finished up painting the hill. As we are going to create the fog on top of those hills, I don't need to go all the way down. And now I'm just gonna let it dry completely before adding the fog. And this is very important. Make sure that it's fully dry. When it's fully dry, we'll be adding our fog. So for that, I'm going to use my mop brush. So this brush is completely dry at this point, right? We don't want to make it damp or wet. It needs to be dry. I'll be adding a tiny bit of white and a tiny bit of water, not too much. It's very important. I'm saying a little bit because it's going to be easier if it's just a tiny bit, because then you can add more, rather than if you use a lot, then it's going to be a complete mess and then it's going to be very hard to change that. So yeah, just use a little bit of white, a little bit of water. I'm even removing the excess of white and water on my towel. So if you have a towel or a paper kitchen towel, that's also going to be fine. And what I'm doing here, I'm gently put pressure on the canvas, not too hard. It's very important that you need to be very gentle. We want to have some transparency here and then go from there. So if I want to add more white, that's what I will do. In terms of movement, what I'm using here, I'm using some like circular movements, crisscross movements. So it really depends of what you like. Honestly, at this point, it's just like creativity, right? So you don't have to do exactly the same with me. You can do whatever you want to do. You can decide to have more white at some parts or more transparency on other parts. So whatever you decide, just have fun. I won't be painting the right part of the hill because we will be adding another hill afterwards. So we're just gonna leave it like this for now. So now I'm adding the other hill by using darker color, sap green, black, and deep green. And I'm getting my filbert brush. I'm adding more water into my brush just to help blending. Here I'm going over with my brush, trying to add some little trees on top of the hill by using an up and down movement. So now I'm adding a bit white into the mix to create another hill. here I want to add more details to my trees. So I'm getting the same darker color, Sap Green, black and deep green, and making those details. Alright, so I'm adding some highlights to my trees now by adding a little bit of white into my colors. So that way we are creating more details, but not too much. Those trees are still very far away from the distance. If you add too much details, then it will look weird. So we're just tapping basically. Here I realized that my heels were a little bit too covered by the fog, so I'm adding a tiny bit of green over that fog. Just a little bit, it's very subtle. Alright, so now we'll let it dry again. I'm using the same mop brush that we've used at first to create another layer of fog. So I'm also using some white and water, again, a tiny bit at first. We don't want to have too much. We want to make sure that we can blend it everywhere and then add more if needed. Again, I'm using some circular crisscross movements by adding gentle pressure on the canvas to have more control over it. And now I'm drying this again. Alright, next I'm using my large filbert brush and I'm going to add a forest, very dense forest in France. So I'm adding some deep green, sap and black all together. I'm not really mixing those colors, I'm just putting it into my brush and tap it into the canvas. Just to have, or create, should I say, the illusion of a big forest. It's going to be very beautiful. I love those colors. Okay, so back to my smaller filbert brush again. I'm going to use the same color, sap green, deep green, black, and now I'm going to add some trees. And those trees are going to be a little bit more details than the one we create in the backgrounds. They are a bit in the front, so we want to make sure that we can see the branches. Not too much, but sort of. So here I'm trying different small filbert brushes that I have to have the best outcome. So feel free to do the same if you have different brushes, just making sure you try. You never can go wrong with painting. You can always go back. So don't worry about it. And I'm also using a fan brush. But I didn't really like the effect on it, so it goes a little bit messy here. So I even tried a bigger filbert brush, but I didn't like it either. So I went back to my first filbert brush that I've used at the beginning. And I blended some lighter colors here, sap green and white. Here I'm adding different trees, different size, different colors. So honestly, it's up to you. The idea is having the smaller trees at the backgrounds and bigger trees at the fronts. You will have more. It will look more realistic, basically. Alright, so now I'm adding more depth into some trees by intensify the dark or the brightness. So again, I'm playing with my colors here. Again, I'm using the same colors, sap green, dark green, black and white. And I'm just using, you know, either more black or more white to create the texture on those trees. Here I'm adding more white into my mixture. By using the lighter colors, I'm going over and create some bushes around the trees by tapping with my brush. So um, I'll go over later and add more definition, but right now I just want to make sure that I block those spaces. And with acrylic paint, the magic tips is to create multiple layers to make a more realistic painting. So I'm trying to add more layers into my trees, different colors again. I'm only using the sap green, deep green, black, whites, and just playing with them. So it's a fun process making trees. I really enjoyed it. So hopefully you also enjoy yourself. Same with the bushes. Now I'm creating different colors, different highlights. So to create the highlight, you just add a little bit of white into the mixture, and then a little bit of black if you want to create some dark, um, some shades. Now I'm adding more trees at the front, bigger one this time. So here I'm actually adding some cadmium yellow with sap green to create a more yellowish green color, which I love. I'm also adding some more darker bushes at the front and on the corners. Okay, so I let that painting dries and realized that I could add another hill on the right side, in between the trees, on top of the one on the bottom. So the space that I let with the fog was too big. So for this, I'm just mixing some sap and white, plus a tiny bit of cadmium yellow. Then I'm adding some more trees of this color. And mixing another darker color to blend with this lighter one. Here I'm creating some texture by using a lighter color. So mix of yellow, sap green, and white. And let it dry before adding our fog. So here's some technique. I added white and water and using a circular movement, crisscross movement too. I'm trying to blend the edge of the hill that I've just created by the trees, just to have like a more natural look. And now I'm adding the fog on the forest I've created. So for this, I'm using a smaller mop brush because we're going to go in between the trees. Alright, now that the fog has been added, I'm adding more trees at the front using a darker color, sap green and black. And I'm also adding more depth into other trees that was covered by accident to the fog. So by adding some white into that paint, I'm creating more light to some of the trees. We want to add more details to the trees at the front. It's very important to add highlights and shadows. What I'm doing here is basically adjusting the shadows and highlights to my trees because I'm using different shades of green. Sometimes you can take a white to find the perfect color, but it's very important to experiment and use different colors. So yeah. And here I'm adding more light to my painting to make sure it looks fine. I'm painting at night, so my lighting is not the best in my living room. Okay, so now I'm adding more bushes using Cadmium Yellow, Sap Green with my mop brush. I'm basically just tapping my brush to create a nice texture and then adding more black. And now I'm adding some highlight to the bushes and the trees at the front, and it's basically some details. Okay, so the last step is adding another layer of fog at the front. So this part, I wasn't sure if I should have added more fog or leave it that way. So I guess it's really up to you. I love it either way, so just make sure it's fully dry before adding the fog. Alright guys, so that painting is over. I hope you enjoy the process step by step. Leave me a comment, just tell me what you think, and yeah, like that video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye bye.